Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to make this beautiful card using the technique of partial embossing. And it's a really useful technique. The thing I really love is that you can have a nice flat area to stamp on, but then you've got all this beautiful embossed texture around it that just adds an extra layer of depth. It's so pretty. This is an inexpensive card to make, making it perfect for holiday and holiday mailing because it's not going to take extra postage, but it's also a winter card. You could use this for any sort of winter occasion, and you know, it's lovely. I wanted to make something that would be more applicable to everyone, whether you celebrate Christmas or not, but also something that you could knock out a few more last minute Christmas cards while you're at it. So we're going to do some simple techniques and they are a lot of fun. So the first thing we're going to do is some masking. So what I've done here is I took a big post-it note and I die cut a circle from it. And I also took a smaller regular size post-it note and cut a little tiny circle from the sticky area. And then I'm going to take one more post-it note and we are going to make a mask for a hill, and all we're going to do is we're going to cut a curvy line here on the sticky border, and that's just going to give us a nice mask for our hills. So, you know, you don't have to be perfect. There are dies that will cut that shape, but you know, it's not really necessary. So what I have here is a piece of cardstock that is cut 4 inches by 5 1/4, so it will layer on a standard A2 size card. So you can get both of those pieces plus a scrap out of a regular piece of cardstock. So what I'm going to do is put my mask on my card, and I've kind of set it, I've kind of lined it, I'm going to line it up to the edge, and then I'm going to put down this little mask here for the moon. Okay, that's going to keep that area of the paper white, and then I am going to get my hill mask and put it right here. And then I'm going to grab an ink brush, a blending brush, and I'm going to grab some dark blue ink. This is Paris Dusk. Any dye ink is fine. I'm using the Mementos because I like that I can keep a bunch of colors out on my table while I'm working. But you know, you can use whatever you want. And I'm just going to brush this over. You can also use blending sponges if you prefer, if that's what you have. I am a little bit better using a brush. I find it to be a little bit more I get a better result. I just get a much more smooth result when I do that. Now while that mask is in place, I want to put some trees kind of in the background. Now the stamps I'm using are from our sponsor, Rubber Stamp Tapestry. You can find them online at pegstamps.com, and don't forget to use the coupon code in the video description so you can save some money. And I'm using a variety of regular stamps. These aren't like anything that I bought new for this project. These are all stamps I had. And I'm going to start with this gray. It's a London Fog. It's just a really pale gray, and I'm going to build some atmosphere in the background. Okay, so these can kind of look almost like an aspen tree far away. So what I'm going to do is just make sure I am looking at the registration mark. I have them lined up, and I'm going to stamp a bunch of different heights here. Then I'm going to use that same stamp and I'm going to get into that darker blue ink, the Paris Dusk again. Now when you have your ink pads all capped off, try to keep your lids nearby because it can be really confusing as to what ink is what. I like how the veins in that leaf almost look like branches, so I can get a few little trees in like that. So those further gray ones just look like they're farther away, and that's kind of what I'm going for there. And I don't want to stamp over the moon with this darker color because I want to make sure that I don't have, you know, the moon should be behind any trees if you have any like silhouettes up there. So just want to get that basic row of trees. Now I'm going to move this down and I'm going to tip it like that. And I'm going to grab my ink brush again. This time I'm going to bring in another color. This is Teal Zeal. I'm going to use both colors. I'm going to use a Teal Zeal and a little bit of that blue, and come in from the edge, and you can brush up over the previous area, and that will just deepen the sky color a little bit more as you go. Oh, another thing I wanted to add in the sky were some stars, and I'm going to use this stamp set here, this stamp here. I'm going to list all of the stamps I used. I know I'm grabbing from a bunch of different sets that you might have, so what I'll do is I'll just link them all up in the video description so you can find them. I like this. This is a great filler stamp because you can really put a lot of background in, and you can overlap it, and it doesn't have like a defined edge, so it's really easy for doing backgrounds. So then here I am going to do some of, now this isn't a tree, this is another like just foliage filler, but I thought it was really kind of tree shaped and looked nice. It's again a plant. A lot of times your plants will kind of look like trees when you put them in like that, and I'm going in with that dark, that Paris Dusk again. That in a few times. Maybe just do the edge of it right there. And I think one more maybe. And now I'm going to move this down again. Get one more row. And again, I think I'll just hit the teal zeal this time and get a little bit lighter. And I'm going in with this pine branch, and that's going to kind of look like little pine trees, especially when they're little. That's kind of how they look. We have a lot of these growing on my property, so I'm very aware of how they look. I want to tip them a little bit each time so they don't look like all the same stamp. There we go. And then I'm going to completely remove this, and again back with the teal zeal just a little bit, hit the edges. And then for the final foliage, I'm going to use this branch from, I think it's from, yeah, Cherry Blossom, and I'm going to use black. Make sure you get that all inked up because it's a little bit bigger than the others. And make sure your black is good and juicy. If not, you might need to re-ink it because you want to make sure you get a nice, crisp impression there. And I'm going to do it kind of like half off in the middle. And then I've got this other branch that this is from Embellished Holiday Wreath, and I'm going to put that in a couple places just to kind of full out, make this a little bit fuller, maybe just the tip there. And then I'm going to grab some grasses because you always have like little grasses kind of poking out, and I wanted to bring a little more green in. So I'm just going to throw in a little bit of that. And then I've got a tiny little tuft of grass here, and this is from Farmyard Animals. So seriously, look at what you have and grab some of those sets you haven't used in a while. And I'm going to throw this little tuft of grass like 3 times in there. All right, and I think one last time I'm going to kind of deepen up my edges a little bit all the way around. Build a little bit of a vignette, maybe use a little bit of black, build a little bit of a vignette. That's when you have the edges kind of darkened. Okay, so at this point I'm going to bring my die cut machine over and show you how to do the die cutting process because it can be a little confusing. Oh, I realized I didn't take the mask off to show you. Let's just peel back the big frame mask, and you can use that a bunch of times. And the little moon mask, and that's what it looks like at this point. I mean, and that's pretty enough for a card. So if you don't have an embossing folder, you don't want to bother with that, that's a really pretty card. You could just stamp a sentiment and call it good. But I do want to pop up a sentiment, so I do want to show you how I'm doing this because this might be a new technique to some of you, but I'm going to use markers to stamp. And so what I have is a Peace on Earth stamp. Now I was going to use this cute one, but the circles it didn't look good having 2 circles on my image. This is Peace on Earth by Rubber Stamp Tapestry, our sponsor, but the sentiment was just a little too small for my card, so I grabbed one from my stash, and I'm going to use markers just to ink up. I'm going to use green to ink up the word peace, and I just found a green that's pretty close to what I was using that would look good with those colors. So you can always swatch it on a scrap of paper and double check that it looks good. And then I'm using this kind of navy blue that looks a lot like Paris Dusk. Actually, it might be, yeah, it is Paris Dusk. It's one of the Memento markers. So so it's pretty easy to match your markers to ink pads when you have those markers, but you can use what you have and just eyeball it, really. Now, after you color with markers on your stamp, you don't want to just stamp right down. You want to breathe on it because your hot air will moisten the stamp, and I've got a lot of hot air, so so there you go. And I'll show you how I die cut that too. It's easier to stamp it first and then die cut around it than doing it vice versa. I did it vice versa here, and I did all right, but it's not perfectly centered. So, so I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, this is my big straw machine, and I don't show it in videos very often. It is one of the original ones. It is over 10 years. I've had it over 10 years. It's probably like, I don't know, 12 years old or so. It was the first one they came out with, and it is still growing strong. So when people ask me what do I recommend for a die cutting machine, I always say a Big Shot because it's never steered me wrong. So what we're going to use here is a product called an embossing I think it might be called an embossing frame or embossing fade. Darice makes these here, these plastic ones, and I've just taped it to the outside of an embossing folder, and this is just a all over pattern damask. You can use any all over pattern, and I like to put it in the middle because sometimes if you put things right up to the hinge, you get that weird unembossed area, so I just tape that right there onto the outside, that's important, of your embossing folder. If you don't have these embossing fades, you can easily take a cereal box, I took 2 thicknesses of it, use your die to cut through each of those on their own and glue them together, and that will make the exact same thing. It'll do the exact same job. So you can use any, even wafer thin die. You just got to cut each sheet of cardboard by itself. It works just fine. But if you have these, this is how you use them. I know it can be kind of confusing when you get a new gadget. So then what you're going to use is the platform. Now I'm using the platform that is sold for a Big Shot, and it's got these 2 tabs. You want to take both of them away. You want to open them both up, because you have this embossing fade thing on there, and what that's going to do is add a little bit of thickness. So I had to remove some of the thickness from my sandwich here. On a different machine, you're going to have probably a different combination. On the packaging of these, it does give you some ideas on what sandwich to use. So if you're not using a Big Shot, please refer to that. So then I'm going to grab a plate and put it down. And then I'm going to get the item that we stamped, so pretty, and we're going to put that in the folder. And what we want to do is line it up so the so it shows through our little window there. Actually, it's probably easier, I just had that on there from before, to put that in there first and then line your little frame up and tape it down in place. That makes a little bit more sense. What I did was when I cut my mask, I found a circle die that was the same size or pretty close to the same size as the hole in there, and I just used these nested circles here. You could use a digital file, doesn't matter. You can cut it by hand with a knife, a scissors, whatever. Alright, so now we're going to put this down here, hinge side first. It's important with embossing folders. And then we are going to put our cutting pad on top. And we're going to crank that through. That's feeling a little tight. Hopefully it's alright. This cardstock was a little thicker than the stuff I used before. So, so it does make a little bit of a difference. Now hopefully the inside, the inside is nice and flat. You see this? I'll show you on the back too. And the outside is embossed. If you look on the back, you can see when you hold it like that, the inside's flat and the outside is embossed. You could do this in the other direction. You could do the embossing first and then do your stamping, but since we're masking, I think if we had those bumps on the edges, it would let some ink get underneath, so that's why I didn't do that. So then to do the other die cutting that I mentioned, I'm just going to go ahead and use my magnetic platform, and I'll just show you this in case you have it and you're wondering about it, or you don't have it and you're wondering about it. I've got that in. I'm going to put a plate down, and these are only good if you have really flat plates, because you need to have some you need to make connection with your dies to the plate so that the magnet can work through. And let me grab my dies. This is a tip. I got one of these magnetic die, no, they're not die holders, magnetic cups from, or bowls, I guess, dishes, I don't know what you call them, from Harbor Freight, and they're great. So when I'm working on a project and I have a bunch of dies out, I just drop them in here so I don't lose them, because it's so frustrating when you lose a tiny little die from a set. You always feel bad if you lose something like that. So I just set that out and I can work on that. So with a magnetic plate, the handy thing is it will hold it in place. Now if you don't have a magnetic plate, it's really not necessary. You can use a piece of washi tape to hold your die down, but this is just really handy. So I'm just lining that up so I know that that's centered up in there. I'm going to put my top plate on and just crank her through. So it's just a little easier to do it that way than the other way. And don't worry if your die cut machine makes those weird noises, because it just happens. It's Wait for the beast, pop that out, and there I've got my beautifully centered up die. I wanted to show another option here that I did on my card, but I didn't really think it added anything to it, and it kind of flattened out the embossing a little bit, but I used this little piercing frame to just kind of make a little row of dots around it, but I really didn't think it showed up very well, but that's something you certainly could do. You would put that down and run that through with a squishy embossing pad, but you do run the risk of kind of meshing down your embossing a little bit when you do that. I didn't think it added anything to this, so I didn't do it in the demo. I thought it added a unnecessary step, but if it's something you want to try, most certainly give it a whirl. So now I do want to add a little inking. I like to ink up the embossed areas because I feel like it adds quite a bit of dimension. So I'm going in with my two blues again. I'm going to start with a teal zeal, which is a little bit lighter, and I'm going to start it on the outside edge and work it in, but I'm going to kind of use strokes like this so that I end up with a little bit of a vignette around my design. Vignette, that's a fancy word. You can impress your friends with that word. And I'm getting it lighter as it goes in. Okay, because I want it to be kind of like a little burst of light around that center. Then I'm going to go in with my darker blue, that same blue. You want to keep repeating the colors as much as possible because that's going to give you that beautiful monochrome, elegant look. When you have fewer colors, you get an elegant look, and you can't go wrong with fewer colors. You can go wrong with more colors, though. Every color you add, you have the option of kind of making it a little clashy. And then I'm going to take that darker color and just ink the edge a little bit so I get a little bit of a frame, or I kind of finish that framed look. Okay, now this is really pretty. I think this is a nice technique, and I urge you to try it on your next card. What we're going to use is a glue pen. This is a quickie glue pen. You could also use just a really like a little paintbrush with some glue, clear glue on it, but I like this pen because it's really easy to manipulate. And I'm going to go through and I am going to add some glitter here and there. And I'm going to do the moon here. Now the glitter we're going to be adding is clear, so it's not going to be super noticeable. I like to do the edges of the hills where the snow is, and you could do some of the trees to help them look a little bit more like trees if you want. These little pine ones especially, the ones closer to you. Do little grasses if you want to. Now the nice thing about this glue pen is that it's going to dry tacky, so you do not have to rush. I'm going to put a few little dots of glisten because we got that moon, so I think the moon would give you a little bit of shimmer. And we are going to sprinkle that with some clear glitter. Any brand is fine. You just want a really fine one. So pretty. Okay, and I'm actually going to use my card base for this next part. I'm just going to tap it. And there you get, I'm going to flick the, just get this very subtle like sparkle. Hopefully the lights are catching that. It's very elegant, very pretty. I like it a lot. And then since we tapped into the card, we can actually just tap it right into our glitter bottle again, right through the mesh. And this is just 99-cent bottle glitter. It's nothing fancy at all. And then I'm going to use a white gel pen to do the centers of the stars. If you look at the stamp, you will see that they have open centers, so that we're just going to get every open spot with a little bit of white gel pen. And you can make up a few as well if you feel like you want a few more stars. Next, I'm going to show you this double ribbon technique. I think it's really pretty, and it looks like kind of two dainty little bows. And what I'm using for this is seam binding. And this is very inexpensive ribbon. It's super thin, and you can actually wet it, scrunch it up, and let it dry, and have a beautiful vintage crinkled seam binding effect. And you get like 100 yards on a roll or something, and it's, you know, a few dollars. I think regular price it's about 10, and I know I got these on clearance for like, you know, probably $4. So it's the gift that keeps on giving because you're never going to run out. So what I'm doing is just wrapping one piece around this panel, because remember we're going to add that onto a card base, and I'm going to snip this with my ribbon scissors. And then I'm going to do the same with the blue. And when I want the kind, I usually like kind of keep the natural, which is a really, really pale natural white. It's not bright white. I find the natural crinkles better, and that's what I use for the crinkling. And then this I just find works just so well because it's so light and the knots are really tiny, so it doesn't add a bunch of a bunch of thickness onto your card for like mailing. So that's what I was kind of keeping in mind in case you wanted to use this as a Christmas card. So I tucked it under that knot so that bow would kind of show up. It's not a bow, it's just a knot, but it has a fullness to it. It's really light and it's got a fullness. That's what I like about it. So you can have that full ribbon look, but not add the weight. And then I'm just going to spread this out a little bit. It's also a slidey ribbon, so if you tie the knot on too tight, you can pull the ends of the ribbon and get it to smooth out for you. And I think I'm going to try to flip this over a little bit so it crosses on the back and on the front. And just kind of fiddle with that until you get it looking just the way you like. And I am going to trim my ends here. And I work right off the spool, and that saves me quite a bit of waste because I only get one little scrap instead of having scraps from both sides. So there are our two little ribbons. So I like to spread them out a little bit so they're not going to overlap my sentiment. And that can go right on there with our fabulous foam squares. Yes, more foam squares. I am rich of foam squares. And be generous with them so that they don't get crushed in the mail. It shouldn't add extra postage though, even though that's, you know, 1/8 of an inch. It shouldn't really. It's still really light. It's going to come in under an ounce, or whatever their regulations are. I just want to slightly overlap my focal point, like that. You can shift your ribbons around however you like the way they look. And there we go. So now we want to adhere this to our card base. So I'm going to use my ATG tape. So I hope this gave you some good ideas for your next card. I love the glitter idea. I'd seen that at a stamp show, and it was so, they did it with like big, like the like bigger images that you stamp and you color. You spend like all kinds of time coloring. You know those ones? Like, you know, you could do it with a house mouse or like a scene stamp, anything like that. And they just touched areas with the glitter. It was so pretty, and it worked for any season. And you just use a clear glitter and it goes with everything. So I thought that was such a beautiful technique. Now, if you wanted to add some extra embellishments, you totally could. You could add some gems or brads or pearls or whatever you like, but I really think this is just so pretty on its own. And I'm going to tell you the difference between these two, this one and the one I did before. The one I did before, I was practicing, and so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for my design, and I worked on like this front piece was a flimsier piece of cardstock. It's still pretty and everything, but I have to tell you, when I pick up this card, it just feels so much more luxurious. And I know if I was to mail this to somebody and they took it out of the envelope, they'd be like, whoa, that is not Hallmark. That is just pure luxury there. I love it. So, so you can use whatever you want, but you can see in a higher quality cardstock, your inks look a little bit brighter. This is the Recollections 110 pound. This was like the Sam's Club, Walmart, Georgia Pacific stuff, which isn't bad, which I use a lot, but I do definitely notice a difference when I use a higher quality cardstock. I think anybody receiving a handmade card is going to be like, wow, that's awesome anyway, but that just brings you up a little extra level. And but anyway, they're both cute, and I hope you give that technique a try. You can find the stamps that I used from our sponsor, Rubber Stamp Tapestry. They are online at pegstamps.com. Use the coupon code in the video description to save some money. Oh, and sign up for the mailing list. I have a link to that as well. They've got some like craft supply sale happening very soon. So check it out, especially if you're in need of some other crafting supplies, not the rubber stamps, but maybe the inks and things like that. But the coupon code I'm going to share in the video description is for all of your stamps. So that's a good, I think it's 20% off. So not too shabby. And I will link up all of these stamps because they came from like random sets. I'm going to show you this really quick. I know this video is getting long. I apologize, but I keep all my stamps in like, it's an old plastic drawer from a container from like from a chest of drawers that broke. And I just put little foam core dividers in, and I put all my stamps in here. And then when I'm doing a project, I look through them like, okay, what could be a tree? Honestly, that's what I did today. I said, what could I use to make a tree or to be part of a landscape? And I just looked, and I didn't pay any attention to what stamp set they came from, and I just pulled out the ones that looked like trees. So I highly recommend you store your stamps like this all together because they're going to be more versatile than just keeping them with their their sets they were sold with. You know, it's personal preference. A lot of people go crazy mixing up all their sets like that, but for me, it's a much more useful way to work. So, so that's all. I've gabbed long enough. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.